Councilmember Lau. Councilmember Crosby. Councilmember Carter. Mayor Pro Tem Davis. Mayor Hepburn.
It's the new process. We're now in a stadium. Large.
Are we good?
We are 2022-23 city budget.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I will, as in the past, do a broad level overview for the benefit of council, and then I will turn it over to the department heads for each of their individual questions or individual comments, and then council will have an opportunity to ask any questions in between that. I have a PowerPoint that has been prepared. You have a copy of it in front of you, and I'm going to wait for JR to bring it up. Before I start, there's a couple of prefacing comments I'd like to make. Wow, that's weird. I'll move this back for the time being. To say the last 3 weeks has been a challenging time in the Laverne family. We lost our former fire chief, Pete Jankowski, several weeks ago. And then last week, tragically, as all of you know, we lost Billy Elfman in an accident. And I know that has weighed heavily on everyone in this organization, and certainly all the individuals that are in this room. And it has touched everybody. And I'm deeply sorry and pained by this as well. And I thank you all for continuing to do the work, but also work through this. And I know I've talked to a couple individuals who said we'll get through this as a family, and I believe we will, and it'll just take time, but thank you. You will notice that with the budget there is a new look. That is being done. That's the start of trying to improve some of the information that is being made available, a little more detail that's in there. That did not come without great pain. So I want to compliment the departments and Marla and Ulysses. As I mentioned last in the preliminary budget, they have put in a lot of hours on nights, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays for sure. So I appreciate the effort in putting this together to get it to the point we do. Or we have it. There will be modification need to be made just because as you go through a new format there are things that we will need to improve and edits, and we will certainly correct some of the minor things that are in here, but I can assure you the dollars and the information is accurate. Some of the formatting will need to be cleaned up. So with that, I'd like to dive into just some of my comments. The first is just for the benefit, next page please. For the benefit of the audience, I know council is aware of this, but our budget process doesn't start tonight. It started back in February. There was work that was being done internally by finance department primarily, then it was filtered out to each of the departments for their requests, fee analysis, as well as review of department requests. That got us to the preliminary budget in May. Direction was given to us to then put together this document. That work was done over the course of the month of May. In the middle of that, we also had a review by the Oversight Committee, because as you know, that was an inserted part of the process as it relates to the revenues that will be used for the added expenses regarding personnel. So that was incorporated on May 17th. And then we have this presentation to you tonight. This presentation tonight is a study session that will allow an opportunity for input from the public as well as council to give us any direction that you feel is needed, and then we will bring this back for final approval on June 20th. The general overview of the budget that is been prepared is a $71 million budget. That is comprised of all funds, so your special funds and your general fund. I will focus most of my comments around the general fund because that is primarily the one that the council has the most discretion over. The other funds are ones that have specific purposes and their uses are being applied, the expenses are being applied to those specific uses. But in total, that the amount of money the city is expected to expend over this next year is $71 million. That includes $9 million in capital, $12 million in utilities, which is our water and sewer fund, and then the other funds roughly $7 million, and then the general fund is 42.1 million. And the greatest part of the news is we are operating at a surplus, which this surplus doesn't even take into account the one-time expenditures. So the one-time expenditures are included in these numbers, and we still have a surplus, which is a pretty significant milestone for us, and I'll speak more to that in the end. As it relates to the resources, this is just a representation of the number of broad categories of funds that are available and that we make use of. The only thing worth noting here is the number of variety of funds that we have. You'll see on the next slide when we talk about our general fund how it narrows down to some very specific categories and what our major producers of our resources are. So on the general fund side, which is the next slide, you can see that the majority fall into various taxes. The ones that I will point your attention to are your in lieu. I'll start from the 10 o'clock and work my way around. You've got the in lieu motor vehicle fees, the charges of current services, property tax, sales tax, and UUT. The reason I point those out is, with the exception of charges for current services, but those are also revenues that have a specific expenditure attached. The others are reliable revenue sources. It's not likely to see drastic decreases. If we had a significant recession, something like we saw in 08, that would be a different circumstance. But as a typical rule, these revenues are solid sources. They're not one-time sources that we depend on. You notice I left out fees, fines, and permits. That 6%, a large portion of that is representative of our building permit fees. So that is cyclical. That will depend on what type of building activity we have. But these other categories are a predominant amount of our revenue streams that help to support the services we have. In total, our general fund revenues are about $35 million. I'll just highlight some of the significant changes, I would say, for this current year. Our property tax is up compared to last year, year-end, about 3 to 4%. Fire fees are going to be higher, and that is the result of both transport, increased in transport, as a change in our fee structure for our inspections. As was indicated before, this better reflects, and when we did the fee schedule, better reflects our cost for doing inspections on an annual basis of the different businesses. So the revenue that will be generated there is higher as a result of that higher fee. Recreation programs is higher as well as we begin. It's almost 50% higher because we expect to bring back our traditional levels of classes and programs that we have provided pre-COVID. So this takes that into account as well as the expense.
How much higher compared to pre-COVID?
I don't know that I have that available for you right now. I think we're back to that historical level. I don't think we've gone much over that. We are just bringing it back to where we were before. And Yvonne would be able to answer that question better, and unfortunately she is not here tonight. So. And then the last major category is the LA HIDA agreement, which, as council is aware, we approved that agreement at our last meeting, I think it was, and so this reflects that added reoccurring revenue stream to provide that accounting service for them. Another part of our revenues is transfers, and those are transfers from other funds where there are general fund activities, expenses that support those other funds. So these are allowable transfers into the general fund of about $7 million. The most common example of that is the utility charges that we have set up where we are allowed to charge part of the utility for the activities of what we do and benefit for that particular operation. And lastly is your general fund reserve balance. The number you see here at the end of 2023 is 10.3. I have asterisked it here because what that does not reflect is at this point we have not booked the sale of property for Amherst. Once we do, and we expect to do that over this next year, as council will remember, $4 million of that is supposed to go into the 115 trust. The remaining 1.5 will go into your general fund reserve. So your general fund reserve by the end of next year is expected to be $11.8 million, the highest level we have ever had in the city of Laverne. So we are moving in the right direction from that standpoint. I'll stop at revenues for a moment, see if there are any other questions on that before I move on to expenditures.
Any questions, council?
Expenditures, again, for the entire $70 million, these are the three categories that we capture broadly our expenditures in. There's capital, which are typical larger purchases that we have, equipment and such, vehicles. Personnel is the larger share, as it should be, as a service-related industry. So that's at 46%, and then operations sits at just over 73 across all. 37. Did I say 73? Is that dyslexia kicking in? Sorry. 37. Yeah. When we look at general fund as it relates to service areas, you can see here that 61% of our budget goes to public safety as it relates to general fund only. So if you were to factor in other funds, utility, and so public works then would grow as a result of that. But when we're looking at the discretionary part of the funds that you have available to spend as you see fit, that's where a lion's share of that goes, and it's appropriately applied. And then you'll see the other departments, 20% going to public works, and then community development, community services falling in from there. Next slide. So a little highlight on the expenditure side of things. On the personnel side, there are probably three drivers of the change in the expenses that we have there. Salary adjustments is something that is not being factored for in here because that's part of Measure LV, and so is kind of net neutral to this part of the general fund. But three things that are included here are a new deputy chief position in the fire department, and that is certainly needed to deal with the added demands for the chief on just the administrative side, the internal work that needs to be done. And that is being supported, the expense of that is being supported by the added revenue that is being generated through either the transports, but also part transports, but also the other part of the inspection fee increase. There's a new accountant position, which is also tied to the LA HIDA agreement. In order to take on that additional work, it was necessary to bring on an added position. The revenue that's being generated exceeds what the expense is for this. We will also benefit operationally from this change, as we will be able to, this person will be able to take on additional duties as far as monitoring of our other grants that we have currently within the city. So we'll get a 2 for benefit there. And then the last is our workers' comp deposit. We are part of a self-insurance program, and our annual payment is based on our prior activity. And we have had a couple years of extended on-duty injury leaves from personnel, mostly in the police department, but some have been in fire. We are hopeful that we are coming out the other end of that. That's a double hit to us financially. One is on the payment for their benefit side, but there's also the overtime impact in order to support operations that we have to backfill for them. So it's certainly a double whammy in that regard. On the operations side, we have 2 things that I think are worth highlighting and maybe talked about more in one of the presentations. The grant writing services, one of the things I know council has been interested in, and I know it's something that the departments have expressed a desire, is to have a grant writing service firm on retainer. And so we've included that in the budget this year. That'll give us a better opportunity to position for grants based on projects that we have, but also maybe opportunities that we're not quite familiar with that they have access to. So we are going to embark on that over the next year and see if it bears fruit, and if so, we will continue that going forward. There is also the camera. We've added additional funding for the camera system for PD, and this is for our license plate reader camera. We are going to be switching the cameras that we own to more of a lease-based. That will give us a more reliable system. We have tried the system that was in place worked well. It's just the upkeep and maintenance on it was just beyond our ability. So the chief had recommended that we move in this direction. It's going to cost us a little more money, but I think the reliability in the long term is certainly going to be better for us. The last thing as it relates to operations, or probably more appropriately in the transfer section, is as it relates to the assessment districts. The city is the assessment districts they have, and we have, and they are on tonight for a public hearing for later this month. Are various areas of the community where there are landscape areas that are attached to certain parcels. There's some up north, there's also a couple down south here. Some of those assessment districts have reached their maximum level that we can charge, but the expense is actually higher than what it is that we are collecting. So what that means is the general fund has to subsidize that, and we are subsidizing that. Now it's gone to about $50,000, so it is slowly growing. The question at some point for council will be either we take it back to a vote of the people to raise that higher level of what we can grow up by, continue to subsidize it, or lower the level of maintenance and service that we provide in the area. So that it's not something we have to address now. Certainly we can afford it, but it's a matter of how long do we continue when it gets to a certain point. And that we did discuss this probably 6 years ago, and at that point the council, we were able to adjust a few things, but the council decided to subsidize it. That subsidy has slowly started to go up as a result. The last on the next was the capital. There's $300,000 that is supported by the general fund. There's another $800,000 that is being supported of expenditures that's being supported by other funds. The primary part of the $800,000 is fire department related expenses, and the pool. The pool, you are going to see, and we've talked about this, several expenses related to the pool. The pool is 25 years old, and unfortunately there are just certain things that need to be done to bring it back up to speed. It served us well. Fortunately, we're sharing those costs with 2 other partners, and we will be paying our portion of the parks development, and the others will be paid by the university and the school district. We do have budgeted about $1,900,000 for vehicles and equipment that fall within Sean's fleet budget, and that is 17 vehicles that he will probably speak a little bit more about, but are scheduled for replacement due to wear and tear and other issues. There is also, and I didn't put a bullet point here, and that is, this is the first time there was a request by the Oversight Committee to consider some Tier 2 expenditures. So we brought back $120,000 in one-time expenditures to them, and they have approved those, and I will let the department speak to those individually at their time. But the Measure LV, in addition to supporting the reoccurring increases of personnel over the last several years, is also going to take on some one-time expenditures. And it can support it. I mean, obviously, anything we spend on something other than salaries will have an effect in the later years, but they felt it was a necessary thing to do. So that was also included.
Before you go on, can I ask a question on that page?
Sure.
Just, I want more information on the deputy fire chief. I don't know what to do. I have a question on that for you. But as far as the grant writer, I'd love to get my 2 cents worth. Our district, when I was on the school board, our school district did not have a grant writer. We were really suffering to get extra funds for different programs. We hired one full-time, and that's all they did, and it increased so dramatically. Having a grant writer, especially with all the untapped monies that are out there for grants, that I really recommend that for the city of Liverpool.
Thank you. As far as forecast, I had a section in the budget, in my budget message, that I will just briefly reference. You know, as we look ahead, I'm pleased, obviously, that we have a balanced budget, and you know, but I think we're poised and positioned to keep ourselves there going forward. We We have several things in our favor that I think are worth at least highlighting for the benefit of the council. Our composition of revenues, like I explained before, is very balanced and something that I think will enable us not to get caught in cyclical changes. We're not leaning on one-time revenues to support or get us to this surplus. Our reserve balances across the board are very healthy, and we have the dollars there to take on the projects, anything from road maintenance to utility, that should come up. We've got a rich CIP program, as you know, and you've just approved, so we have a 5-year plan that is fully funded at this point, provided we get some of the grants, and so to your point, the grant writer will be very important to allowing us that. The council's decision to issue a POB, the pension obligation bond, to address the PERS unfunded liability enabled the city to get out of this growing cost as it related to our pension. We still have an ongoing cost. We have to pay this annual payment, which is 3.4, plus we have to pay our normal cost for pension. But we've been able to cap that, so it's not something that we're chasing going forward. And then Measure LV. Measure LV is a huge piece of the puzzle for us going forward in order for us to maintain a practice and afford it for the next 10 years is critical. And that practice is to ensure we are able to attract and retain the level and caliber of employees that we've had. So I think those are just some thoughts as we start to look ahead as to how we can feel good that this shouldn't be the last but the first of many surplus budgets, and that will allow us to start thinking of how to expand, not just maintain the services that we have. And this represents my 12th budget as city manager. I can only recall one other time in that span that I've reported a surplus budget, so I'm obviously excited about that. The previous measures I noted are a key reason for that. However, a large part of the credit goes to the managers that help put these budgets together. It is their reasonable requests, looking for creative solutions to their department needs, and support of each other's in the various departments of their colleagues that allow us to live within our means, and that's always a challenge of a full-service city. As you know, this is a relatively new team, but each one of them had picked up where their predecessors have left off, and they've just taken their department and made it a little bit better. They've improved it in each of their respective ways. And I want to thank you each for that, because it's because of that that we are able to improve the organization and how we benefit and serve the community. So thank you. Getting us here also took the hard work of this and past councils. It is you that must make the tough decision, supporting cuts to keep expenses in line with revenue, or allowing us to use reserve and not sacrifice services. It's a delicate balance that you must strike. It's something that you have to do. Through your efforts, we have been able to not overextend ourselves and keep ourselves where we're within striking distance of that annual budget. So it is that fiscal practice that has brought us here. So hats off to you as well. I thank you for your continued support of me over the years and this team. And I appreciate and hope that you will have the confidence in recognizing that the requests that are being made here are done to best serve the needs of this community. And I will stop and answer any questions or let you get the specifics of the departments. Thank you.
Questions, council?
Why is it so freaking hot in
Ready
here?
to dive in.
I was wondering, all of a
Yours
sudden
hitting
the
the wrong one.
temperature's
He's
going
gotta
up.
hit that.
Wow, I'm sorry.
No, I think it's the sun hitting those windows and it's just starting to heat up.
I know, I gotta take my jacket off now, but I wasn't gonna stop in the
Obviously,
middle, so
you're
I was like,
like,
and I sweat at the drop of a hat, so it's gotta look really bad right now.
Just gotta get.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that's what I thought the last 3 times I hit it.
Well, Mr. Russell, we just want to make sure that you're in the hot seat when you're talking.
Yeah, thank you very much, I appreciate that.
And I'm probably gonna have to borrow your mic, so
Oh.
just slide it over.
No, I
Should we cut
I
it
don't
down
need it that
budget,
far.
make
Just
sure that
right there's good.
I just want to just echo those comments that City Manager Russi said, that it takes a village, just like anything, and it takes the residents to be able to invest in our city and believe in our city and stay here and shop here and gas up here and go to church here and do all the things that we did during COVID. But it takes a very balanced staff, and especially with our new staff, we're very tickled to have new people on board to be creative, as Bob said, and also the fact that looking for monies in places and turning over those rocks again even more than we ever have. But I'm very proud of the fact that we are balanced. We have a future that looks healthy. I think it's because, as he said, our previous council and our current council, and just the fact that everybody works together as a team, and I think that's extremely important. But I'm very happy. I mean, as we know, things can change quickly, so we have to keep our eye on the ball at all times. But I really do appreciate staff's input and what they've done and give us these numbers, and also just the fact that Measure LV, thank goodness people are trying to scramble to get a Measure LV in their own cities, and it's not that easy anymore. And with our pension obligation bond, I think it released a lot of the pressure off of our city to be able to move forward, get our fire department back started up again. Public Works reinvigorized our police department, invigorized again with great leadership, and community development department, also community services, we're really kind of rolling fast here and furious, and it's a great team. So I'm very, very happy to be a part of that. Hopefully I'll be around after tomorrow, but we never know as the election's coming. But thank you all very much. I can't say enough how much we really do appreciate it, and it really takes a team to make this work. So, comments?
Yeah, I'd like to just say though too, Bob, when I came on in 2008, then we got the recession right away. So, working with the budget, you came on right after I was already elected. So then you came in and you were just thrown this as a recession area. Now figure out a budget to work with. And it was, bad years. And then going through COVID, that was huge too, trying to handle that. So I appreciate all the work you've put into balancing, but working and guidance. Everybody needs leadership. And, I've always respected your leadership with that, and I know staff does too, and so thank you for that. But yes, as far as LV, it shows what commitment our community has. People stand behind. Nobody likes to be taxed. And that's what they said when they said, well, I'll vote for it. But they understand the value of the employees we have. They want to support what we had and to keep moving forward with our fire department, with our police, public safety, and all the departments. So I applaud the community also with a balanced budget, and now we can move forward with wonderful programs.
Yes, thank you for the previous council and administration, because of our due diligence, the previous councils, and making our reserves high, that we were able to get through COVID using part of our reserves, but coming out of it now, having more reserves. One concern looking forward is always the sky gets gray. Inflation is rapidly growing, gas prices, food prices, and that means employee costs will be going up as well. And we got to make sure that we maintain our employees and our staff. But because of that leadership, that we just have to make sure and keep looking at that. A reserve is good, but that next rainy day can come very soon. Hopefully it rains so we can turn our sprinklers back on. But we need to make sure with all costs going up, and that cost is going to be reflected in our budget as well. Running our police cars, running our public works, and our fire trucks is not getting cheaper right now, and maintain them either. And so we got to make sure, but it's not always about our equipment. It should always be about our people, and that's going to be coming up next. So just looking out for that future.
I just wanted to extend my thanks to you, Bob, and to all the department heads for working together cohesively to put this big budget together for us. It's not easy to understand all the time, for the layperson, because you're used to working on your home budgets, and this is a much, much bigger task. And so I appreciate all the thoughtfulness, the creativeness, to getting to this end result, which I think is great. I think, again, not to reiterate, but to reiterate, the foresight of the people who came before us really saved us during the pandemic. And so I think keeping on that track and making sure that we do have money set aside for a rainy day, or God forbid another I'm not even going to say it out loud. But, you know, being prepared for that, I think, is really important. So thank you for thinking creatively, working together, and really pulling together to try to make this work for all of us, because this is really important to not just the people who are able to attend city council meetings, but obviously everybody in the city, whether or not they're able to participate live in person or not. So thank you. And I also want to just say thank you for the grant writing, because similar to what Councilmember Carter indicated, that is a big job. And that is not something that you can off-put to someone and say, duties as assigned. That is not going to work. So I'm looking forward to finding that right service where they will work with each of you to identify where the appropriate grant funds should be coming from and getting the appropriate information communicated so that we can bring in that extra revenue. So again, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to reserve my comments until after I get to listen to this wonderful team give us detail about this budget. I'm not ready to close this meeting yet. I want to hear what they have to say. Okay,
We're
it
just
sounded
priming.
like it. I thought we were closing.
We are priming the pump.
Okay.
Okay, we shall continue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be doing an overview of the general administration, city clerk, and city manager budgets, which include personnel, risk management, finance, and information systems. These fall under cost centers 1,000 through 1,700 and encompass pages 19 through 34 of the draft budget. Under the City Council's cost center, an additional $10,000 has been programmed for the Pepe Smith Public Information Officer agreement that we have. Without knowing the election outcome, as the mayor mentioned, there's an election tomorrow. Without knowing the outcome of that, we also plugged in sufficient funds to cover all 5 council member salaries for the next year. For the city clerk cost center, funds have been included to complete a comprehensive municipal code analysis and review that was requested by the council previously this year. Additionally, while the election is in June of 2022, the majority of the cost, about $80,000, will occur in the next fiscal year, and is why additional funds are being requested under that cost center. The Personnel Management Division continues to experience a larger demand related to recruitment activity, workers' compensation claims, employment issues, and the pursuit of employee development opportunities. This next year, staff will be looking at implementing process improvements in each of those areas. The proposed budget also anticipates a focus on employee development and training. Our hope is that by providing these types of opportunities, employees will not only gain better skills, but also be able to continue to grow within our organization. The Finance Division is responsible for required financial reporting, including the city's comprehensive annual financial report, and undertakes multiple financial and compliance-related audits. As the city manager noted in his message, Finance is requesting a new accountant associated with the LA HIDA fiduciary duties, which will be offset by a revenue to fund the new position. The Information Systems Division continues to support and enhance streaming of public meetings, although we have our technical difficulties every once in a while, as well as provide the funding necessary for general IT services for the city. The proposed budget includes one-time capital outlay requests of just over $60,000 for IT for the fiscal year, including $15,000 identified for citywide computer system replacements. We basically created a schedule to make sure that we're replacing things timely, and then an additional $45,000 for public safety specific hardware replacement. The city attorney's cost center includes a $15,000 increase from the previous year's request based on actual activity that we experienced this last year. But we've seen consistently, we've been better than probably a lot of our neighbors in that area in talking to my colleagues. That concludes my overview of the budgets 1,000 through 1,700, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Any questions, council?
I guess the only question I have, just to make sure it's included in here, is the budget writing feature is in this section of the budget. The grant writing.
Oh, gotcha.
I think we put it under 1,600. Is that what
Okay.
we?
It's in the report here.
Well, it is, and I was just,
Okay.
I was going too quickly probably, but,
On page 20.
okay, got it. Yeah, I see it on 23. Thank you.
I'm guessing it's in the 1400 section.
Thank you. Okay. Yep.
Looking at the other one going,
Okay, thank you.
we're good. Gonna die on this one. Hey, I wasn't too silly not having it on, though. Yeah, we're talking, Colleen's got, she's not complaining, and she's got a vest under that vest under that vest. Yes.
I think we're ready for the next section.
Yes, we are. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. It's my pleasure to bring you next year's Community Development Department's budget. This is my fifth budget presenting before you. As you know, community development principle is to have a role in the oversight of the balance between land use and economic development. Community development includes city planning, building and safety, engineering, housing, economic development, and historic preservation. Currently, our department is fully staffed for our needs at this time, which is a good thing, and we are not requesting any new positions in the next coming year. But I do want to point out we do have a new contract building inspector. Previous building inspector Tim Plains, we congratulated him in his retirement recently. So we do have a new building inspector through our contract with RK Consulting. In the last year, we're proud to have approved several projects. One was 8 new single-family homes on Baseline Avenue. Another is a combined project which included 50 multifamily apartment units on Fruit Street, and then a connected 8-unit affordable housing project on Walnut Street on city-owned property. We also approved an 80,000 square foot industrial tilt-up building on White Avenue south of Arrow Highway. And we are a participant along with Public Works on the planning for the future pedestrian bridge from the Gold Line Station platform over to the Fairplex site, the portion that's in Laverne. Community Development also was tasked with applying the American Rescue Act funds for a business assistance grant program that we're still in the middle of processing. But that's in a collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce and the University of Laverne Small Business Development Center. Lastly, we are almost complete with our transition to online building permits. We've got most of those up there. Some of the bigger things still have some bugs we're working on, but we have seen an increase in activity on the online building permits, which is helpful for, I think, everybody, not just the applicants and contractors and residents, but also for city staff and building inspectors. For the next year, we have several projects that we're looking at. The long time and somewhat delayed completion and adoption of our general plan and housing element update. So we hope to do that in the fall to be able to complete those long-range planning documents. We're also expecting to review and receive an application and review and approval for a significant transit-oriented development mixed-use project in the area of the Gold Line Station within the city's enhanced infrastructure financing district area as well. We expect at least the start of construction on a lot of those residential projects I spoke of, including 42 homes, single-family homes on Amherst Street, and then the Fruit Street and Walnut Street projects are, we expect to issue building permits for those, as well as the 80,000 square foot building and 17 units on the corner of First Street and White Avenue. It's expected that the pedestrian bridge design work will be completed this year, and then we will be trying to secure the funding to be able to construct that bridge through multiple different funding sources, but nothing that relies upon the general plan, or the general fund, I'm sorry. We continue to assist with Public Works, City Engineer's Office, with the construction and coordination with the Gold Line construction itself, and those matters. This year's expenditures and revenues are slightly lower than last year's, And that is predominantly related to lower anticipated construction activity. However, this current year is anticipated to be higher than our average year in terms of both things. So we do have elevated projects, it's just that last year we had more. So there's a slight dip in those, but still higher than our historic numbers in that regard. It's important to note, though, that it's very possible that some of these projects might slip to the following fiscal year. So it doesn't mean that the city won't see those projects at some point, but it just might not be in the next fiscal year. We do our best to estimate these things, but as you know, somebody pulling a permit is out of the city's control. So as the city manager alluded to earlier, these are one-time costs, and there's expenses and revenues. They're tied together, but they're kind of out of our control. They're not static things that happen. So at mid-year, when we come back, we'll give you an update on where we think we're at that point in terms of revenues and expenditures related to building activity. Also reflected in our department's budget are other programs that are not supported by the general fund. That includes the CDBG program, the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District expenses, the Old Town Laverne Business Improvement Districts, their independent budget. They have their own revenues and their own expenditures, but it is supported and gone through the city, so it is reflected in our budget, and you did approve that budget at your last meeting. And then finally, the retirement fund obligations for the former redevelopment agency, those obligations. So those are all reflected in community development, but do not have direct impact on the general fund. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Any questions for Director Scheer?
Just even with the buildings that you started, the construction that's starting on Amherst, construction starting on Walnut and on Fruit, we still might even see a lower than we had last year?
Correct. So sometimes one-time projects will come in that's not on our radar. For example, in this current fiscal year, Gilead had a pretty significant tenant improvement project inside their building that this time last year we were not aware that they were planning. They never came to us, and it's really an over-the-counter type permit, but because of the nature of their business, it's a significant project just the same. So that was something that wasn't anticipated in the budget this time last year. We fixed that at mid-year to adjust up those revenues and expenditures that relate to that type of project. But it was something that we didn't expect. So not only the ones that we expect sometimes fall off or get pushed to the following year, sometimes things that we don't know today, next week we might find out about a new development that might be obtaining permits, building permits within the next fiscal year. So that's the tricky part. We do our best. We also do this conservatively, right? So we make sure that we scale back, and that way typically I think every year, Bob, that we've achieved higher revenues and higher related expenses than what was in the budget, just because we typically do it conservatively. Yeah.
Any other questions for Director Scheer? I just had one real quick question. We had discussed this before, but the baseline project, that was sold, is that correct, to someone else?
It's currently owned, and it was sold, my understanding, right when entitlements were granted by the city. While that was approved by the city, there's a second part of it, if you recall, that the annexation process. I didn't list that project in anticipated building permit revenues for next year because that annexation process I don't expect to be completed to allow for the issuance of building permits in the next fiscal year. So while the council did their part, there's still the second part dealing with LAFCO and getting the annexation process completed, and there are some problems with that we're working with the owners on to resolve.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Scheer. Mr. Russi. Thank you. Remind me, budget for more budget for more speakers, I guess, huh?
I guess we can't share.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. This is going to be my first budget presentation, so I followed 12 years and 5 years, but nonetheless, here we go. I feel like we've done so much work together already. This is good conversation. I'm a salty veteran at this point. All right. Well, at the beginning of my appointment, I had spoken several times to, or promising really a full review of processes and workflow in order to provide better accuracy, transparency, and sustainability. As such, the 2022-2023 budget indicates a 4% decrease in operating costs with an 11% increase in personnel costs. Conversely, and this is a conservative number, we project a 38% increase in revenues through, or as a result of better accountability and more comprehensive cost recovery. However, it is important to note that with much of the COVID-19 restrictions no longer in place, I do anticipate that the impacts of the fire department, not only our operations and people being sick, et cetera, over time backfill, I do also anticipate a return to pre-pandemic call volume, which we're already actually seeing right now as well. The significant increase in personnel costs are due to several reasons. A 2021 salary and benefits increase was realized through the negotiation process, if you'll remember back in fiscal year 21-22. Additionally, we did implement the 12 new ambulance operators, as well as 6 suppression positions that were reclassified, 3 of them to engineer positions from firefighter to engineer and 3 from firefighter to captain. We also went back and reanalyzed what we were spending on prevention-related costs and overtime costs for the shift battalion chief who was serving in that position, and were able to identify the funding necessary to implement a 40-hour full-time fire marshal. That was also indicated in this budget as well. I'd also like to remind you that this is in comparison to the initial beginning of fiscal year 21-22, not necessarily where we sit now. Let's see. Fiscal year 22-23 will also realize a full-time deputy fire chief and the reclassification of a management analyst to a senior management analyst, which we have in place now. Fire suppression staffing was increased, remains consistent with 3 stations, 2 paramedic fire engines, a paramedic ladder truck, and 2 EMT ambulances. The department's anticipated to be fully staffed shortly after the fiscal year 22-23 start. Worst case scenario, I would say by the beginning of August we will be fully staffed, which I believe for the first time in roughly 4 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. That would consist of 33 sworn full-time, 14 non-sworn full-time, and 4 non-sworn part-time positions, all full. Community risk assessment and standards of cover analysis, as you're aware, has been completed and will provide the objective analysis for future strategic planning needs based on the above listed deployment model, and at that point we can have a discussion about expanding the department and how we'll look to do that moving forward over the next several years. The department's operating budget maintains accurate allocations necessary for all the divisions. That's 2000 through 2009, I believe. The holistic reductions are the result of more accurate line item adjustments and a in-depth critical analysis of historical expenditures. We were able to really dive deep into the history to see where we were actually leaving money on the table and kind of clean it up to make sure that we are budgeting correctly. Capital requests are urgent operational needs relative to the end of service life, new mandates, or program implementation needs. And if you recall, that was for radios, radio programming, remote speaker mics, thermal imaging cameras, replacement rescue tools, airbags, some issues that we notated at Fire Station 3 when we reopened that fire station, some new lockers, the exhaust removal systems in our stations to help with cancer prevention for our firefighters, and also the addition of a new off-road rescue utility vehicle, which will not only be used for recreational purposes up in our hills here to the north, but also, as you've seen, we've been utilizing our ambulance operators in all of our special events lately, and that affords them the opportunity to navigate through those tight quarters of our special events and take care of people. Those funds will be, for those capital requests, those are going to be handled by our 250 fire equipment replacement fund, so those will not be a direct impact to the general fund. Oh, let's see. The totality of capital and personnel increases over the previous fiscal year are expected to be offset by the significant revenue increases I mentioned before and projected throughout the year. The department is expected to replace an additional utility support vehicle, 2 administrative support vehicles, and an ambulance in this budget cycle, which are going to be accounted for in the public works vehicle replacement fund. And in addition, looking forward, we're likely look to fund a second ladder truck, replacement ladder truck, considering we are still looking to improve our mutual and automatic aid agreements with LA County Fire, who surround us entirely, and we have identified that there is a need for further depth as it relates to ladder trucks in this entire East Regional area. Having that backup ladder truck will allow us to, the adept to be able to provide that ladder truck service even when our frontline one goes in for basic maintenance or repairs. We are currently looking at a used ladder truck right now. That would be, quite frankly, about 10% of the cost of a brand new one, and would also avoid a 2-year delay to get that piece of equipment in service, now that our truck is in service full-time. And finally, we'll also look to potentially add a full-time administrative training or EMS captain. We currently have a captain administratively assigned in that position right now who has been incredibly helpful at implementing much of the changes that we've done at this point, and also provided that additional 40-hour depth beyond just me in our administrative offices. That position, much like the deputy chief that we're requesting for this year, will be, in my belief, fully funded by the increased revenues that we've been able to identify moving forward. And that is all that I have, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you. And as I said, this is not your first one, because giving us that presentation some months ago, and then now seeing it come true, you're already in your second wheel in. The importance and the question of adding the training, was it a captain?
Training captain. Correct.
Yes, because we had to pull a captain off their duty to help train, or either pay overtime to help train when they weren't even on duty. Then this will help that support and give our firefighters the training what they've been asking for,
Sure.
and what they need for our residents as well. Correct?
Correct. We've been paying overtime, if you will, filling that position with overtime since we implemented it roughly 7 months ago. And the intent behind that initially was to help implement all of these changes that we were making. But as you've identified, or we've all identified, training has been a significant issue for Laverne Fire historically, as far back as I can tell, because we don't have a training grounds here. We're part of the LA County Regional Training Group. However, the closest training site that we have is roughly 15 miles away or so. And it's hard to do that when you have to send units down the road. But it takes coordination, that takes planning, that takes a lot of communication at the regional level. And having somebody to do that and provide that depth is critical to.
And then part of the savings, though, too, is maybe not paying the overtime. We can get that to pay part of the salary instead of how we can use money for that.
Correct.
Well, you're always creative thinking, and by bringing people in, and by really staying in your budget and wheelhouse of trying to get the funds that we are doing and finding more funds in there. So I really appreciate that.
Sure, and I appreciate that. Like I had mentioned when I first came here, I realized that there was a lot of opportunity to have better accountability over our revenues, and that was something I actually didn't mention. We're projecting upwards of roughly $3.8 million in revenue this year, which ultimately requires the city's general fund to fund an $8 million fire department as opposed to the 12 that's being presented here.
Council?
Yeah, okay, so I asked you that I was going to come back to the deputy fire chief.
Correct.
Tell me in rank and file, like, is that directly under a chief, above battalion chief?
Sure.
Is
The
that
best
how-
way to compare it, I would say, it'd be similar to a captain over in the police department to Chief Flores' position. So it'd be second in
Okay.
command. So it'd be another 40-hour chief officer that essentially can represent me in this position when I'm unavailable, whether that be for personal vacation or if I'm out assigned to some other opportunity. For me as the fire chief, it's very critical that I be able to pay attention to strategic planning, setting the vision for the department, moving the department forward administratively, much of like we've been doing, and ensuring that we are relevant to not only what's going on regionally, but also at the state level with everything going on. The intent of a deputy chief is not only, again, to represent me when I'm unavailable, but primarily to focus on the day-to-day operations. What I've noticed since I've come here is it has been very, very difficult to keep up in the day-to-day. Every single day is 100 miles an hour because there's operational components while I'm trying to stretch my brain into the administrative side and keep up with all of this. So I believe it very necessary to have somebody that can focus on the operations and hone in on the day-to-day, whether it's discipline or calls or whatever's going on. In addition to that, 2 of our battalion chiefs right now One's on an incident management team. The other one is qualified as a division soup and looking at operations. So they get out and they bring back that experience and that knowledge back to our personnel, and that also generates revenue for the city. So to be able to have that chief officer depth to help fill that battalion chief office in the day-to-day is also very critical. And I noticed when we first got here, we had one chief officer that would help out with that, and there were days that he would work 2 weeks at a time straight. It was mind-blowing. So.
Okay, good. And I just want to say, since this is my last time, thank you. Thank you for coming to Laverne. And on behalf of the 1,600 signatures that wanted to keep our fire department, and that was only in 2 weeks, I thank you. And we'll keep fighting and always supporting our fire department to keep that in our city. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Anyone else?
I guess the question I have, I appreciate everybody's comments, but I guess I just want to be clear. In this budget, you're asking for a deputy fire chief,
Correct.
not the captain. We're not asking yet for the safety captain yet. Is that right?
Sure. So
Okay.
the revenue projections we're being very conservative on. We've done a lot in a very short period of time, and understandably, the approach is being taken that we should err kind of on the side of caution. So we'll look to ensure that revenue is coming in before we look to fund for additional positions. And once we know, or we start to see that in January mid-year budget, I'll likely come back and ask for it.
So
at
we're
that time.
thinking mid-year we may see a safety captain. Gotcha. I just wanted to make sure what I was seeing in here was well defined. That's all I was mostly asking. But yeah, I applaud you for that. I'm glad you're going to full-time fire marshal, and I'm glad you're promoting your analyst to a senior, and so we don't have analytical flight, which is always also a risk. So thank you.
Sure, and quite frankly, she's the one that runs the fire department, not me.
We know that.
I was saving my thanks to her for the end because she really wrote this. So you presented it well.
She's been with us a very short period of time, but absolutely dove in head first, has done fantastic work for us.
I see that earpiece right here where she's communicating with you.
You're not supposed to see that.
Her lips aren't moving, though.
I know.
I just want to, applaud you for what you're doing with the budget, being creative, but I'm also really excited about the training component and the reinvigorated morale within the department in terms of being able to see a path and being able to see, where we can succession plan and where we can really make best uses of our resources and to make people feel like they belong. So I appreciate that on top of the fiduciary duties that you've fulfilled. So thank you.
Thank you. And just to touch on that, I would like to, again, thank all of the department's personnel for getting on board and understanding where we were going with the department and how we were going to get there. It's been incredible for them to understand a lot of the analytical stuff that they typically aren't exposed to and understand it's how we're being patient while we move the department forward and add all those numbers up.
I just want to say on behalf of myself, and I can speak for everyone here, that I really appreciate the fact that you took a department that had some issues and you really, I want to say, erased them almost, and you brought on some extremely talented individuals, and you're doing the right moves. And the whole thing about it is finding those resources and those money to put it together, but not necessarily attacking the general fund, which is awesome. I think that's a really great job. Your team's great. I think I've just heard nothing but positive comments. So kudos to you and your staff and all your new people that you brought on. I think we're going to be a safer community for it, number one. Because we've got our fire marshal and all of other pieces that are falling into place, but also the training is extremely important. Plus your equipment purchases, where I see those on the every time I look at the ledger, it's like you're buying the right equipment to keep people safe, and that's the most important thing. And I think I'm really tickled about the fact that you're going to get a pre-owned Quint, which is going to be really good. So you'll have one in service at all times, hopefully. Although I was wondering if Robin was going to ask if she could drive the brush truck, because it sounded like you're leasing that out or something. So I was just curious. I did it. That's what I did. I thought, they might not like that on the roads up there with the biking, but I'd sure love to drive that thing. Anyway, great job. We really appreciate it. Continue it. And like you say, you're working well with Bob and the city staff and all of the other departments. Like you say, it takes a village, and with council, and we're just going in the right direction. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure, and if I may, I'd really like to thank Marla for all of her help as well. It's this working through the intricacies of a budget has been challenging, and having that expertise has been very helpful as well.
Thank you. Mr. Russi.
We now have to pass the mic all the way over the other side of the table, and it goes to Chief Flores.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Mayor Pro Tem. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you. So I, too, was going to touch on the teamwork for all the department heads. We had a lot of working parts in this budget. We all adapted just great, but we had a great team effort with all of us. And this year, too, without a fleet manager was really tough. And, 3 of us have the largest fleet. So I'd like to thank Public Works Director Igo because he took on that whole fleet budget where we usually sit and work together on that. So thank you, Sean, for that. As you know, the police department, our highest priority is public safety in collaboration with our community, and the quality of life remains our number one priority. With the increase in the homeless population, we have expanded our homeless outreach team, which is an ancillary assignment. We're not ready to do a full-time assignment, but we do it on overtime, and we do the best we can to work with Tri-City to get services to them. We have a long-term plan coming to council next month at a council meeting. But for now, we do the best with what we have, and we appreciate the city's support with that, with just on an overtime basis to try and mitigate the calls for service when it comes to the homeless. Last year was quite a challenge for us staffing-wise. Most of the year, 6 of our sworn staff members were unable to work due to work-related injuries, personal medical, or reassignments. So that tasked a lot in our overtime budget. And then we had to dip in further to really fill the staffing. Same for records and dispatch. We're understaffed in both of those categories, so that too really hit us hard in overtime. We're slowly getting our people back to work, which is good. On paper, we are fully staffed in the sworn department. It's just we need to get them healthy and get them back out there to help us out. So once they are fully staffed, the goal of the PD2 would be to expand our canine program, and our command staff will work with our canine foundation to help grow that program. But until we're fully staffed, it's really hard to pull more people from the field to add new programs. As just in training is huge for us, we're very fortunate that our current existing training budget supports all of the legislation changes that we've had, all of the promotions of the several supervisors, new officers, professional staff, the growing homeless outreach team, and the growing special events team. All of that requires training. And again, thank you for the support in that, because our training budget really keeps us going and in compliance. The Measure LV funding, we're very fortunate enough to keep our AED program. As you guys know, we've given several life-saving awards out, and those are mostly because of AEDs. So thank you for your support in that, and for the Laverne tax measure, because it's hard. You can't put a cost on the life, but it's a costly program, but it's definitely worth it. The Laverne measure also gave us electronic bikes. It's not replacing the gas vehicles, Mr. Crosby. We still have to pay for the gas in the cars, but we are getting 4 electric bikes. That's going to help us with special events. You're going to see them get out there more. We'll have less injuries. The bicycle program is a good program, but it's difficult to maintain and to train. So the electronic bikes are going to be very beneficial. You'll start seeing us out there. And for that, that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Council?
I'll go first this time. No special license required for this electric bikes, right?
So you too can ride.
Well, that's what that was really the reason for my question. But
Electric bikes, whatever.
I'm more active transportation than we. Oh, always a helmet. Absolutely. Thank you.
Council?
Just really appreciative hearing about filling all the positions, because we did a lot of promotions and really promoted some really great people. Speaking of some, two right in front of me in my eye right now as well. But big shoes for both of your positions to be filled in as well. So it's really great to hear that we have done that, and then bringing on new people. I want to highlight the tobacco grant and the piece that you're doing for that in the schools, and the work that you bring back to the YFAC committee with us too, and all the work that you've been doing there as well. So really appreciative of there, and the training, just that is the most important and really piece that we're all seeing in the news the last couple of years, that we need to make sure that we are all properly trained in conducting ourselves as a professional officer. And I know Laverne really holds that proud, and I'm glad to live in Laverne with officers like this around us, keeping us all safe and responding. You have responded to many calls on my street, personal street, in this last year. And
Is that a problem?
no, it's
You know,
wasn't my house.
Mr. Crosby, you're up in 2 years. That might be an issue.
There has been some catalytic converter thefts right off the freeway, and they have responded like that. And just the professionalism that they have done and kept our community safe. So just want to make sure I really appreciate that.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
The dog piece, I know Ms. Fisher and the canine group has been really forward in trying to get pieces for the next level to get another dog for Laverne. And I know you spoke about it. We need personnel and things like that, but that is a community that's really appreciative for that and keeping that up as well. So just make sure that we're keeping that forward in our process as well.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We're in regular communications with the foundation board members. It's coming. I just need healthy people.
And I wanted to thank you for all that you do, your leadership. You have the respect of your department and the community. You know, you're out there. People know you. And it wasn't that way 10 years ago, you know. And the department is open, both for fire and for the whole public safety building. You know, the public safety fair was amazing this year. The numbers that came through there was so impressive. So, Colleen, from one woman to another, I'm so happy that you're in our city and our police chief, and you have my total support. And you have my husband now, too, so. Well, I don't mean it that way. Okay, let me clarify.
My electric bicycle comment's looking a lot better right now.
My husband.
You're on that strike that
is an
last
RSVP.
Chief
and proud
Torres,
to
have
be
you talked to your
one.
husband about that?
I know exactly what she means. He's one of our volunteers, and we have put him to work.
I think she was saying, thank God you have my husband for like 8 hours.
He's at home right now.
No,
I
he's
got
been
it.
great. Thank you. No, he's
You
been great.
got my husband.
All of our volunteers are great. You know that, too. They are.
I just wanted to say thank you on the piece that Councilmember Carter brought up was the community part of it, right? And you've heard me say this to you multiple times that I would love for all of our residents to have the same type of positive experiences with our police that I have enjoyed for many years. And I think it's highlighted when you can see police officers at events, when you can see police officers out in the community. I just saw Jay at commencement at ULV, and we're both ULV grads. I mean, years apart because I'm old, but it's okay. But it's nice to see faces, and it's nice to have that connection. And I would love for the next generation of residents, and for some of those that are current residents that maybe don't have that relationship, to continue to have that and feel comfortable calling and saying, hey, I saw this happen, or can you help me with this, and really feeling that partnership. So I thank you for your leadership and for really encouraging that and really building on that.
Thank you. We're very lucky that you guys support all those extra programs that we do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get in the community because it does cost a little money. But, for example, Citizens Academy, we're doing that right now, and we have that they're enjoying it. They're going to be on the range this week, having a good time. But all those, the open houses, every event that we do costs a little money. So we thank you guys for your support for that. It's our best way to engage with them. So thank you.
I just want to echo everyone's comments here, but I do want to say that you've brought accountability. You have a tremendous amount of respect through the industry, showing by when you were badge pinning for chief. It's just impressive that you come with an entourage of people that trust you and back you. And also your movements within the police department have been exceptional. You're doing a fantastic job. I think being the first woman police chief of 116 years just shows the direction that our community is going, and to realize that the talents that people have. And we're really glad you came from Arcadia, whatever, sorry they lost you. But,
Thank you.
But that, and also I just think the fact that you are engaged, every one of the officers is engaged. We're a community that people, I have never, and honestly, I've been on council for 7 years and on the planning commission for 2. I don't think I've ever had a complaint about an officer. and that's stellar. You know, there's other communities they can't say that, and that's just the fact that the training and knowing that they, you know, and even taking care of the homeless. I know it's a problem, but treating them as human beings, which they should be treated. It's just that we don't have a lot of control over how we can remove them off the streets to get them in a safe environment. But again, to you and your staff, it's a very open atmosphere, just like the police department, the fire department, community development, public works, finance. It's just everybody's very friendly. You can walk in, you can ask questions. But kudos to you and your staff. You've done an excellent job, and we're looking forward to many more years of service.
Thank you.
But thank you. Oh, and also K-9. You're right on it, and I appreciate that because you've got some people that, including myself, that just think the program's wonderful. But you have to have people in order to staff it. You have to have the funds, but they raise money like no other, and they are so ingrained in it. And I think it's wonderful for your staff for protection. But again, it has to be when you're comfortable to do it and move forward with it, which I'm sure you will. So thank you.
Getting there. Thank you.
Mr. Russi.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. As I had shared with council, community services, which would normally be handled by Yvonne Duran, she had a family service that will make her unavailable to attend, unfortunately, this afternoon. Her budget, as I had shared some highlights in my message of the significant changes on there, are all reflected within her numbers. There is no change in personnel. They are funded to 6 full-time positions and the variety of part-time staff that they have. I'll give an opportunity for council to ask any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, I will have to defer to when she is available otherwise. So,
Council, comments, questions?
No, she's made herself available prior, and really appreciate that as well. I think getting back to pre-pandemic services, recreational services, not only for our youth but our seniors and any in our community, is a good, healthy thing, and that's what her and her staff have been done. Her and Chad have been doing an excellent job.
thank you.
I just want to, she's done a great job, and I mean, now that things are opening up again, the only thing we do need is we need to put in the budget a new balloon arch because I think everything's falling apart. Just so you know, we almost lost her off a ladder trying to put that thing together. It's breaking. I wanted to go back to one thing about Chief Flores also is the fact that I didn't finish my thought there, is the fact that your RSVPs and all of your volunteers, we couldn't survive without them, and I am so happy that COVID is mushed this way, away from that they are your eyes and ears, and I hear nothing but unbelievable comments about how wonderful they are. They check on people. They check on me. Why is your RV in your yard? I parked it there for a day. Okay, just checking. So, but they do check on everyone, and they check on the people like Yana and everything else. And again, but give it back to Yvonne. She does a great job. I think you see it in the registers. You see what's going on. That all of the sports are coming back together. She's reorganizing the department. She's doing a very good job, and we're going to kick it off again, and it's going to be healthy. But that community center is just jammed all the time. You can hardly get in there during the week, which is a testament. And the lunch program and everything else, she's doing a great job. So, yeah, thank you.
I'll pass that on.
Thank you. Mr. Rossi.
Actually, it goes to Mr. Ego.
All right. This is a short pass this time. Short pass. Yeah. Yes. We'll pretend. Well, good evening, Mayor and City Council. As you've heard several times, I really have a lot of thanks for not only my Public Works team and my management team, but the finance team, my fellow department heads, the City Manager Russi, and then obviously all of you for your support. So that, like as the Mayor always says, it truly takes a village. It's a lot of people that really have to work together to make sure that this budget comes together. And for Public Works, we have a lot of intertwining relationships with fire, PD, community development, community services. So again, it truly takes a team. So tonight, I'll be giving a brief overview of the Public Works Department budget request for 22-23. I'll also be giving a brief presentation on the CIP, which you already heard, but I'll just give a brief overview of that as well. So Public Works is committed to maintaining the city's infrastructure and providing a high-quality service while also ensuring regulatory compliance in a fiscally responsible and effective manner. The Public Works Department is comprised of 6 primary areas, which include buildings, streets, water, sewer, fleet, and parks. We are also responsible for maintenance and management of various contracts and grants. Additionally, we are tasked with oversight and implementation of various construction projects through the city's capital improvement program. Projects completed this year included the City Hall AC unit replacement, which we put on pause while Bob gave his presentation. Our parks refuse cans. Our parks refuse cans, paving and resurfacing of areas such as Durward, 5th, 6th, and 7th Street, along with Country Club, Monterey, and other surrounding streets. There is an approximate change of 4% reduction in the operational budget this fiscal year. This is related to several position vacancies that we're currently working on filling, additionally to some contractual reduction of services. This does not impact operations, but it does impact our budget overall. There are a few increases related to this year, which are related to obviously skyrocketing material costs, fueling costs, and then we're also seeing some increases in utility costs. Additionally, there are one-time capital outlay purchases, which include speed indicating street signs, which are beginning to see their end of useful life, so those need to be replaced. We also have end of useful life for our air cards that connect to our irrigation system. We need those for connectivity to be able to monitor and maintain our irrigation system, especially as we continue to see reductions related to drought. And then also, we have a one-time request for our water and sewer rate study. This will give us a primer to make sure that we are in compliance, making sure that our rates are set right, that also we can afford moving forward not only our operational costs, but also our capital improvement programs as we begin to replace some of our aging infrastructure. So this will be a one-time cost we'll undertake this year. One thing to note regarding utility-related revenues is we did project a decrease in the anticipated revenues. This is primarily due to the reduction in water usage we anticipate due to the drought. So, again, we're still anticipating a decent revenue, but we did make a reduction anticipating reductions in water usage. With filling the vacant fleet manager position, Public Works will be reevaluating several items over this next year, including electrification of our fleet, our chargeback system to ensure that departments are charged accurately, not only for maintenance, but also future capital vehicle replacement costs. Additionally, we will be reevaluating or evaluating a fleet leasing option. This could potentially lead to some cost savings on our end and reductions in maintenance costs. So this would be something we'd grant to council at a later date, but we are evaluating that this time. These items will continue to allow us to provide high-quality service to the community, including operations and maintenance of nearly 100 miles of street network, over 1,000 parkway trees, approximately 150 vehicles, 132 miles of mains, and over 100 miles of sewer mains as well. We continue to undertake our environmental compliance needs related to water, stormwater, wastewater, along with solid waste compliance, which is related to SB 1383 and AB 1594. Additionally, Public Works is responsible for the maintenance of 33 acres within 9 landscape maintenance districts, or LMDs. Brush clearance is typically completed twice a year with 83 acres. You have Laverne Heights, Marshall Canyon, and Live Oak assessment districts. The services provided by the Public Works Department is the foundation for the city's overall services that are delivered to the community. The contributions to make the city of Laverne a safe, attractive, and vibrant community. Again, I greatly appreciate the involvement of everyone here and also on my team that helped put this together. This concludes my overview of the Public Works budget, and I'll answer any questions.
Council, questions or comments for Mr. Igo?
I do. Sean, I want to thank you for your department. They're very helpful. You know, anyone that calls in, you've got a great staff there. So I just wanted to say for your department, so that all of you know, is we have quite a few HOAs throughout our community. And this past year, our community is getting old throughout the city. But as you talked about here, replacing street signs, I had called our department and for Public Works and asked, you know, who do you use? And there actually is standards for street signs. And so it was so helpful, even though our HOA paid for it, which every HOA will. But I want people out there to know that you can call our city to find out what company they use, and they have the standard that we need in Laverne. You know, because we have brown street lights, street signs, and then we have green. I think it's brown is the city, and greens are HOAs. So, you know, you have to know those kind of things. So thank you to your department. Please pass that on. But, you know, your department runs so smoothly, and you just took over the transition just beautifully.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Would you like to speak?
I just wanted to, highlight what your department does, because I think a lot of times you're sort of the unsung, behind the scenes heroes of the city that people don't recognize. I love my public safety folks. You're very easily recognizable, but people don't always know that, hey, if something goes wrong on a street light, whatever, it's public works that goes out there. If someone's, a sprinkler head is broken somewhere, they're out there. When there was graffiti on Arrow, it was a quick call to say, hey, can you please get on this and work with the property owner? And it's done immediately. And I think that cannot be taken for granted, because for those of us that have had to travel or traverse through other cities that maybe don't have as quick of a response time or as on top of it, Public Works Department, it's not pretty to drive through. It doesn't feel safe, right? And Public Works does a lot to that. So please tell your folks thank you for all that they do, and that we do see them even though we don't see them, and we appreciate them very much.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Crosby wants to say something too, so I'll try to keep it short and sweet, and that is that I want to appreciate several things. One is sort of humorous, but I'll still say it, and that is you gave the shortest presentation for most of the work. You don't spend most of the money, but you do most of the work. He's got 6 different divisions in here, and I'm just saying for anybody who has a complaint about our public works, just drive outside of our boundaries. Full stop. I mean, as a cyclist, I'm now that I get to work from home, I'm creating more in-city Laverne routes, and I really appreciate the shaving of the sidewalk program that's going on. That makes a huge difference for skateboarders and for Razor, the little scooters and stuff like that. I still see kids trip and fall, but not as much because asphalt changed their momentum. So, no, that's been huge. So thank you for that. And thank your entire staff, because you guys are top-notch. I mean, granted, that's not taking anything away from anybody else, but you guys are phenomenal.
Thank you.
Mr. Crosby.
Bottom line, they work in the sewers. Talking about the work. Couple questions though too.
Sure.
With our big wins this past year, and you talked about a little bit about replacing trees and stuff and plans. Just want to make sure that's on our forefront, because I know a lot of our parks and we had some great trees, and I know if we take out a tree from our residents, we're supposed to replant. And so when the trees came down naturally, that we need to make sure and replant those for our parks.
Absolutely.
The assessment district, with the price rising, and Bob spoke about this a little bit there, above the cost to do the work. I think as a council in the next year that we just need to revisit and then make decisions on that too. Doesn't mean that we have to change or stop, but we just really have to look at that. And because of money going out of over expenditures on different assessment districts, is that what we're doing for our entire city as well. Sure. And then kudos on the fleet. That is a difficult job. And you not having a fleet manager, taking that on yourself has been monumental. So appreciate that work and you're doing, and let's buy used equipment to back up some of our other equipment. Really appreciate that as well.
Sure.
So if we can get that, if we can roll that out, that'd be awesome.
I think I deal with Mr. Igo more than most, because I get a lot of calls from residents, and obviously that it's just the department and how they service basically the entire community. And the fact is that Director Igo is always responding to emails, always responding to residents, and especially you guys did an unbelievable job during the storm. And I will say it again and again. Your people were there. Your contractors were there. They were polite to the individuals. They were polite to people. They opened streets up quickly. I even went above and beyond and cleared stuff they probably shouldn't have. But, we're that kind of city. We need to do that, and just the fact that you're accessible And thank goodness you're replacing some police vehicles because they are looking really ratty. Just so you know, they are looking ratty. But I looked at that list and I thought, but it's perfect timing because they're starting to wear and tear. You wouldn't think this little town of a few square miles would wear those cars out, but they do get a lot of beating. But kudos to your whole staff. They're friendly. Anytime you run into anyone, anytime you talk to anyone, they're very friendly, whether at the city hall, whether on the streets. They're all doing their work with the grinding of the curbs. They're taking care of the maintenance. They're at the parks. They're all over the community, and they're just you've got a great bunch of people that work in your department, and we really do appreciate it. But I appreciate the fact that you're forward-thinking, and also the fact that you address to customers and residents, and you treat them well, and I really do appreciate that. And they really appreciate the response. The emails you get back, so I really appreciate that. I didn't know, So, but thank you again. You're doing a great job. Mr. Russi.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This last section we have is special programs. This section is dedicated to those areas that are typical, either tax measures where we receive money, Measure R, Measure M, Prop A, Prop C, but it's also been increased to include the LA HIDA grant that we have. And this just highlights roughly $9 million, almost $10 million of expenditures that we're responsible for. But again, these are dollars that don't fall in the general fund. I just wanted to go over a couple of points in that, primarily your mass transit, which there are two pots of that. There's Prop A, which is mostly programs, but there's, and we use that to fund the Get About program, which is our fixed route for our senior program. And then the other thing that we do fund out of that is we have the opportunity with that to trade some of that money. And so some of that is exchanged with another agency, and then we get general fund dollars in return to help support these other activities that were shared with you. And then that is going to be roughly $800,000 this next year, which is within the allocation that we will be receiving in new dollars. And then the second is Prop C. And that is similar for mass transit, but it's also for construction-related projects. And what you are going to see in that particular area, and will come up in your next meeting, in your council meeting, is the issuance of a bond will be funded through this allocation on a going forward basis. But these are dollars that are for that purpose, so they're eligible for that use, so they're a qualified fund that we can use for that 20-year bond issuance. And then again, going to the last page, just to point out that the $6.3 million of the increase here is the result of the LA HIDA activity, which is part of that agreement that we talked about as the revenue and the accounting. So I just wanted to go over that. These are also now most of these expenditures are folded into the different operational areas, which is new for this year, dependent on the department that has responsibility over them. So they'll reside over there, they'll be tracked over there, but we will also just have an annual where they all kind of fall in one spot. So just to highlight that. Other than that, I don't have anything else to add.
So you'd like direction from council, is that correct?
That'd kind of be ideal.
Okay. I think that we're pretty much, it's not a vote, it's just direction, correct?
Yes, if we get consensus from council, we'll put this on it for next meeting for action.
Council, I think we're in a consensus that we move this forward. Then you have your consensus, yes. Please move it forward.
Before
Yes.
we want to move to the next topic, I just want to thank Marla. You put this all together where we did kudos for everyone, every department, but kudos to you and your team, because without this, we wouldn't be able to speak that tonight too. So
Ulysses.
Appreciate giving this information about every department, and so that we can highlight those, but want to make sure to highlight your department as well, putting this together. So thank you.
I will mirror that also. Thank you very much. It's been this is one of those things that's becoming more clear how these numbers function and how they actually work. It really helps us to break these down in categories to see exactly how these are broken out, seeing what we're paying for, seeing what the funds coming in to help us do this, and also categorize it, the FTEs and full-time employees and things like that, that it's really nice to see that, because then we understand a little more of how this relates to actual, as we always say, boots on the ground and people, and just how the budget breaks down. So thank you. And Ulysses, I know that I saw your desk the other day when I came through on Saturday, and was like, I thought, uh-oh, this man's busy. this is a busy spot over there. And I do come in on the weekends, and I do see you guys here, and I do appreciate. I know you're burning the candle, as everyone does. But the point is that it takes the finance director in order to push this forward, so everybody can work on their budgets and do it properly, so we have a correct budget we can look at, and the city works with. Thank you.
I just want to echo those thanks, and I really do appreciate this, the special program section at the back too, because I think that's part of having folks understand the entire budget, that it's not just one giant pot of money, that there are different pots that can only be used for certain things, and I think that level of clarity really is good for all of our residents to have. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for coordinating all of this. And I would be remiss, Eric, I'm so sorry. Thank you for all the things that your department does, because one of the things that I did talk to Bob about when I was looking at the budget was, sometimes we get this grant money that we need to find a use for, but it can be so restrictive that we have to get really creative. And so I really appreciate you. I really appreciate Candace for all the things that you all are doing behind the scenes to try to figure out how can we get the most bang for our buck? How can we make sure that we aren't leaving money on the table? So, thank you for all that you do in that respect. And please tell Candace.
Just one little, and I want to jump on that one too, the fact that you guys run some programs as far as the wine walks and all of the things with the Divot and all the things you guys do as a community development department is just exceeds all of our expectations. They're always run well, people are friendly. It's a lot of work, but you guys do work with the community very well, and we do appreciate that. And your staff is always friendly. The counter's always friendly, as all of the counters here that are in the City Hall. A lot of cities aren't like that. You don't even get in contact with a person. You're online, and sometimes it's just nice to have a person you can deal with and solve your problems. And, we have an older population, which I include myself. They like interaction. I like to know that I'm going to a person, I can write a check, and I can be done with it, and it's taken care of. So, see, told you. The old style. No more, no, but thank you. I do appreciate that.
It's called old school.
Old school.
Yeah,
No,
and many of us like old school.
Yes,
but
so
I too want to reiterate or say that this package here was phenomenal. And so I want to thank staff who really did the work and their leadership who are taking credit for the work but also helped to implement it. But moreover, this document and what you guys have shared with us tonight has really shown the creativity, lots of creativity in the police department with the programming going on, lots of vision in fire department and creativity of how we're going to get to the next step and then the step after that. So I'd like to see that long-range vision. But the key piece for me is that we have a team here that works well together and feeds off of each other, because I can see creative pieces coming through every department, and that's really it makes our job up here that much more fun to be able to sit on the talent and not sit on. I didn't mean it that way. No, I don't. Well, see, I'm the light. Yeah, never. Right. So sitting up here, recognizing the talent that we have in this building and in our community to provide services to our community is really a blessing. So thank you all very much for all that you do for our city.
Sure, go ahead.
All of our department heads are amazing, but it also takes a city manager leader. And Bob sat with me last week over 3 hours going over this, and really, I'm sorry that you had to spend that time, but really do appreciate the time you give each and every council member so that we truly can understand what's going with the budget and moving forward. That we read the document and there's one thing reading it, but now having to be able to ask the questions and go in details. And appreciate your leadership, and which makes them be able to shine and give their leadership to their departments too. So appreciate that.
Thank you. It is truly a pleasure and an honor to be able to sit in this spot and work with all these individuals and the 5 of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So, no other business? We're going to adjourn to our 6:30 meeting. Yes? Oh, do we have any public comment? I'm sorry, we didn't even do that. Oh, any public comment?
None was received before.
Hand up.
Oh,
Sean, will you just put it?
Miss Beauchamp, come on up. We're going to pass the mic. Just don't drop the mic. Just pass the mic.
Good evening, Council. questions that I had on the presentation that Mr. Russi presented at the beginning of the meeting, unfortunately, that material is not made public, so I do not have a hard copy that I could print out. What I did gather from it was there was an explanation about the reserves, and it was projected at $10.3 million. 5.5 of that was from the property sale on Amherst. Where is the balance of the 4.8 being generated from, number one? And then question number two is, I noticed that in every department there is a line item, with the exception of the community development, there is a line item pertaining to legal expenses. Not every department utilizes that entire balance for legal expenses, so where does that money fall in the following years? But also, what happens when the budget that's allocated for that particular line item is exceeded? So, like, for example, one of the departments, I believe, had $185,000, and as we all know, the fire department had a much larger expense in litigation a few years past. So those are my questions to Mr. Russi. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else for public comment? Please, come on up.
Kathy Kalusek, 3rd Street. I'll pick it up. There we go. To sound loud enough. I recall, and I think it was maybe last year, council had approved budget to build a better security around our police station. And I just wanted an update on that because I know nothing has changed, and I think it's important. Thank you.
Anybody else for, yes?
Can I sit?
Yes, you may.
I'll make myself comfy. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I'm Julie Wheeler and proud board member of the committee. Am I stepping over? Am I in the wrong spot?
The 6:30 meeting. 6:30 meeting.
Are you rescheduling me?
Yeah, we are going to have you open up. Yeah, hold that thought for 20 minutes and we'll start another meeting. But thank you. But now that we know you introduced yourself, there's no problem whatsoever. Anyone else for public comment?
On the budget.
On, oh, you can do that.
So feedback on the budget. One, I think it's amazing that the people that were able to speak tonight, that it speaks to with the value of new energy and talent, not to disparage prior leadership, but what new ideas can bring to the table and result in positive outcomes. They're not just short term, but it sounds like they're all long term. So I'm really glad to hear what we heard tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabaldon. Anyone else? Do we have anybody on the phone?
Nobody online, and I just checked with the She said no later writing.
If there's no further comment on public comment, we're going to close public comment. If there's no comments by council, I think an adjournment is in order. We're going to adjourn to our next meeting at 6:30.
Do you want me to answer those questions?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. God, I'm just.
So, I mean,
I'm flying. Sorry.
I'm
just,
so
sorry, Ms. Beauchamp. You have very good questions.
I think I can make these really quick answers. So on the reserve that you were referencing, the current reserve without the sale of property is 10.3. I'm going off of my memory, so if the decimal is off, excuse me. What I was referencing is that the sale of property of $5.5 million hasn't been booked yet. $4 million of that will go into a separate reserve trust. There will be an additional 1.5, that net amount, that will end up in the city's reserve. So the reserve will actually be over $11 million. So don't count that 5 and deduct it from that. It's actually an additive number to get us to a higher reserve balance. As it relates to legal and the expenses, and this happens with all of the accounts as our cost centers are budgeted, those are projections for what we expect to spend in the coming year. If there is anything left over, it just falls back into the general fund in any expense. Those are the maximum dollars that we expect to spend as an agency, even this $70 million. So whatever we don't spend in that regard just falls back into the either general fund or restricted fund that it is entitled to. Now, if we have expenditures that exceed that, if the department can't support it by other appropriations in other categories, then what we would do is we would come back at mid-year and ask council for an appropriation of additional dollars. As it relates to the public safety fence, that is an ever-growing project and cost. So we have actually directed some additional dollars out of ARPA to help pay for that. I think we are waiting on a final number from our city engineer, but our intent is still to move forward with it. All right?
Okay.
Now.
I think that's it. So no other public comment. We're done. We can go ahead. It's 6:13. We're adjourned to our next meeting at 6:30. Thank you, everybody.